Namaskar. Welcome to Conversations with Rakesh. Here's today's question. Sir, you have spoken a lot about confidence. I suffer from very low confidence. I keep doubting on myself. Are there any books that you can recommend where I can improve my confidence and reduce my self-doubt? This whole genre of self-help is full of good books on the question that you asked. I've benefited from some of them myself, but I thought that in this video I'm going to give you 3 books that are not from the self-help category, they're from different genres. And these books are landmark books that might help you because they've definitely helped me in dealing with my own confidence issues and self-doubt issues. I must tell you that all of us human beings have some degree of self-doubt, some degree of self-esteem, high, low, which impacts our confidence. And I must encourage you to think that this condition and number of confidence, high and low, changes every day, every minute. Our objective should be to make it as high and leave it as high as possible. But if it goes down, please don't blame yourself, because rejections, society, comparisons hit us. And we are living in one of the worst times possible for our self-esteem and self-confidence because of social media, peer pressures, and the way the world is structured these days. So let me give you these 3 books one by one. Each of them is from a different genre, but each of these books have a very simple message that I took when I read them, and I hope I can pass it to you. And after reading these books, I hope you feel better about yourself, your self-doubt about yourself reduces, and your confidence in you, your self-confidence in yourself increases. So here goes book number 1. This genre is called biographies, and this one is a great book written by David McCullough, and it's called The Wright Brothers. It's the biography of the Wright Brothers. These 2 brothers successfully took a flight, the first successful flight in 1903, and gave birth to a massive industry that we all benefit from today. And while this book is very well written and I encourage you to read it, you should listen to David McCullough's lectures also. They're available on YouTube. He has written various books. Some of them are gold mines, and he's a great storyteller. But he's also a good speaker. So if you can't read the book, listen to his lecture. I might have quoted this book in some other videos as well. Now let me give you a perspective why this book is very good if you're suffering from self-doubt, which is impacting your self-confidence. The Wright brothers were not trained or educated to be aeronautical engineers. They actually started to tinker with mechanical parts. They were bicycle makers. They had a workshop. But their father was heavily into books, and they had few books on birds, and both the brothers were enamored by the way the birds would fly. And they would always ask the question that what would it take for man to fly? And the experiments were happening worldwide. And these 2 people, imagine, you are not an aeronautical engineer, you're not from a great college, you have never flown in your life, you're not a pilot, but you know how to tinker a machine, self-taught, reading, experimenting. Plus the book talks about some very harrowing experiences that Wilbur or Oliver Wright had. He was beaten up and bullied. And we all go through these issues. But despite that, they had confidence in themselves. They built it up. They started tinkering around in their workshop. They started going to a place where nobody would disturb them, and they started to make things fly with wings. They started studying stuff, whatever they could get on thrust and wingspans. They looked at birds and they started designing things so that it could fly. And every day they probably would have gone through criticism, laughter, but they went through that. And in fact, when they did the first test flight, they were ecstatic. And they went all over the world to talk about it, and nobody would invest in them. And that's where, imagine the kind of hammering they would have got on their self-esteem and their self-confidence. But despite all that, the 2 brothers kept going. They were successful. They paved the way to a massive industry, the airline industry that you and I are now benefiting from. We are now traveling across the world, and it's not superly expensive. It's affordable to many of us. And it is because of the conviction of these two brothers and many more people who had the hope and the confidence that I can do it. And they kept trying. And how in these books they talk about how they overcome their own self-doubt, they kept their confidence up, and they made the flight possible. So please read this book, The Wright Brothers, which is about the story of how these two brothers made the 1903 flight possible and how it changed the world. So that is the first genre, biography. The second genre is travel. This book, it's called South, and this is the definitive book written by the man himself, Ernest Shackleton. This is a fantastic story. I think there are movies on it. You'll find YouTube videos, a National Geographic special as well. In 1914 and 15, there was an expedition to the pole. Imagine, in those days, people were crazy to find the place on earth which is the southernmost tip and the northernmost tip, and there was a race, crazy race for that. And there's no Starbucks, there's no coffee there, it's a terrible place and you could die, but people were crazy to go in ships in those days to put a flag there and say that we are the pioneers who made it happen. So Ernest Shackleton and his crew on the Endurance was one such ship that wanted to go to the pole, and it got stuck in the ice with nothing around, no cell phone, no radio, no means to communicate. And they were in that place for months. And this book talks about how they survived those months on snow and how they made a daring attempt to come to an island which was hundreds of miles away, and how Captain Shackleton lived to tell the tale, went back and picked up all his crew who was still alive, and they all survived that harrowing experience. Books like these and movies like these and documentaries like these are brilliant ways to understand how did they pass time on those savage conditions with nothing to do. And the book talks about how Shackleton had a routine and how he would make his entire crew go through that routine. Imagine you are depressed, doubting yourself, fighting yourself that why did I even take this journey? Everybody's stuck, my life is over. How would you regain your confidence? How would you make your men listen to you? All that he did. And after some time when there was no food left and their ship was broken, how do you survive in that cold condition? How do you make that terrible journey on two lifeboats knowing that you will die and come back to live the story? Very inspiring. This book, Shackleton, it's called South. And the book's called South, the story of Shackleton's last expedition, 1914 to 1917. I think it's very well written. It's like a diary of Shackleton, notes from his diary, the travel logs, and how he then pieced it together to write this book. It's a little tough book to read because the fonts are small, but the movie is slightly more juicier, and the National Geographic documentary is even better. But I encourage you to read this book, that whenever you are facing that, oh God, my life is over, I made a mistake, why did I do this, what will I do, I'm stuck. I think the story of Shackleton and endurance can be a great way to lift your spirits, be a lot more confident about yourself, reduce your self-doubt, and tell yourself that, okay, I still am alive, let me try my best, let me push forward, and let me make the best of today. So that is the second genre, travel, and how it can lift your confidence and reduce your self-doubt. Third one, this is from sports. This book is absolute brilliant. It says The Inner Game of Tennis by Timothy Gallwey. And this book has a very simple message that when you play a sport, inside you there are two selves. Self one will say that I can do it, and self two will say no, you can't do it. So the book talks about the inner struggle that we face, which is so true these days, right? I work with a lot of CEOs, managers, students, and they're all struggling with self-doubt that I can't do it. I mean, I have the best degrees, but I still can't do it. I have the best resources, I still can't do it. I have the best family, I still don't feel good enough. I have the best health, I still feel that I'm lost. This is the inner struggle that deep inside, we ourselves are telling to ourselves that I'm not good enough, which is creating a big problem for all of us. So read this book, The Inner Game of Tennis, and the book researches sports people, that people who win sports are better tuned mentally. They are able to reduce these inner voices, which are self-doubt voices, and they convert them to positive voices, that I can do it. It is challenging, but I can do it. Many of us look at a challenge and like, oh, I can't do it. Arey main to mar gaya, main haar gaya, which is a big mental problem we're all dealing with. And I'm not trying to ridicule it. We are going through it. So books like this tell us that we create our own problems sometimes by our inner voices. And if we can learn to manage our inner voice and reduce that or change it to optimism and positivity, chances are that you'll be a lot more happier, much more confident, because your self-doubt will be controlled. So the third genre book is The Inner Game of Tennis from sports. The second book which I talked about is a travel book, South, Ernest Shackleton. And the first book which I told you is biography from the aeronautical industry, The Wright Brothers by David McCullough. There are so many more books, but these three should be the starting point for you to look at life all over again. And when you read these stories and books, you sometimes are awed by how much they would have struggled in their own lives at that time, and look at our own lives very differently. The challenges we are facing are immense. I completely acknowledge it. But we also have the capacity within us to do something about it. So each of you who is very high on self-doubt and very low on self-confidence, my message to all of you is, you are still alive. You have the air in your lungs. Go and make the most of it today. I was watching this lovely movie called Turbo, which is a story of a snail that wants to compete in the Formula One racing. And the snail has some superpower which makes it brilliantly fast. And in that there's a scene that this snail is competing, and the competition is tomorrow morning, and his brother asks him that, what if you lose your power tomorrow? What will you do then? And the snail says, then I better make the most of today, because I have the power right now. You know, these scenes are sometimes wake-up calls to us, that कल क्या होगा डर लगता है, but आज मेरे हाथ में है. And the choices I make today will impact tomorrow. So I can make tomorrow win in my favor. But that inner voice, that self-doubt will tell you कि नहीं मत करो, let's run away, let's find some safer place and hide there. Fine, I acknowledge it. But when you then look at these books and these stories, they tell you that if you choose the harder path by suppressing your self-doubt, you might feel better, because that's where your confidence will go up. So on that note, try and manage your inner thoughts, reduce that noise, focus on a purposeful career. You have it in you, but you need to work on it and move forward on it. And that's the path to reducing your self-doubt and increasing your confidence, regardless of the outcomes. That's why we say, karam karte raho, phal ki chinta mat karo. So on that note, my dear friends, please do share more books if you have read on how to become more confident and how to reduce your self-doubt, and share it in the comments below. And on that note, stay safe.